into the application. So we'll work on delete functionality, of course, on the server side and the RESTful service, and then we'll go back to the Angular application and add delete functionality there as well in our data service that we have and in our different forms. So as a quick overview, we'll start off with a delete action added using Express. So we're going to create a route that takes an ID, and then we'll map that to a function that's going to be called, which will then handle deleting that customer from our MongoDB database. We'll then take a look at how we can use our Angular service to issue a delete request using the HTTP client. From there, we'll then modify our customer form to support deletes, make that delete request, which then calls the RESTful service. And then we'll also explore our reactive form and see how we can get that going with a delete operation as well. So let's kick things off again by starting on the server side and getting delete functionality into our RESTful service. Put and post operations. Our RESTful service can also handle the delete action. Now this again is an action that you wouldn't use with a standard web app with a form tag and things like that, but when it comes to different clients calling up to the RESTful service, we can let them specify these different types of actions. And in this case, we're going to focus on how to work with deletes. So going back into our API customer's route and the customer's controller, we've already added several gets and the ability to insert and update. So now we need to add a little bit of code so that we can handle our delete operations. So we can do that the same type of way. First thing I'll do is let's come down below the update that we already added, and let's add a delete customer, and it's going to take our request and our responses again. Now this particular delete operation is going to have a route parameter. We have to have the ID, of course, of what to delete. So we'll go ahead and do that by calling into our customer's repository, and I'll look at that in just a moment. But let's come on in first, and we can say console.log like we've been doing, and we'll say delete customer just so we can know when it's called. And then we're going to use the customer's repo that we've been using throughout the course. So let's go back to that. And if we come on down here a little ways, you'll notice that we have a delete customer, and that simply uses our customer model to call remove based on the ID that's passed in. So we need to grab in the controller the ID, pass it into here, and then it will take care of handling the delete operation. All right, so that's going to be pretty easy actually. Most of the work's done for us. So we're going to say customer's repo, delete customer, and we need to grab the ID off of the route params. We've done that before, so it's going to look like this, params.id. Now in this case, I really don't have anything that's going to be passed back except for potentially an error. So I'm going to make my arrow function for that. And inside of here, now we'll handle if there's an error or not. So we'll do like normal. We'll say if there's an error, we'll go ahead and do a little bit of logging. And let's go ahead and log out something like delete customer error. And I'm just going to grab what we have right up here. So we're going to do the same thing. All right, and that'll take care of that piece. Now in this case, I'm just going to return a simple status code. We certainly could return the error and all that, but either the delete worked or it didn't, and the server side would log any errors that occurred, of course. So in this case, I'm just going to say, let's just return a status, and the status here would be false. Now if it works in our else, then we're going to do a true. So let's go ahead and just get that out of the way. And we'll do true, and we'll be kind of good to go on that particular aspect. All right, so now that we have that available, we need to test if this works or not. So first thing, let's do our log again. And we'll say that our delete customer OK worked. Now we have the ability to, first off, call delete customer. We'll log that out. We'll then pass the parameter, which we're going to have to make in a moment, for the ID into this delete customer. If it returns an error, we'll go ahead and log it, and then just return a status of false. Otherwise, we'll say true. Now, if we wanted to return a custom error, remember we had an error property. You'll see it right up above here, and we could certainly add that. So we could say error, delete failed. Now that's not going to give too much info. That's why the false in this case is probably all we need. But if you wanted to return more, we certainly could. Okay, so that kind of takes care of our delete customer. So now we need a way to call this when the route comes in. So we'll come back up to the top and we'll, on our router, say when there's a delete, and it has an ID on the parameter here, on the URL. Let's call delete customer. And then we'll bind it again to this, just to make sure the proper context is calling it. All right, so now we have our two ways to get. We can get all customers or single. We have a way to insert. We have a way to update a particular record. And we have a way to delete a record. Now, as usual, we need a way to test this. So let's go ahead and open Postman. We'll give that a shot. So I've already issued a GET request, you'll see, to bring back all of the customers. So I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom record here. And in this bottom record, we'll have some kind of fake sample data. So you'll notice we have this James Dan, which is a record we're going to delete. So I'm going to grab this. As we know, this route now has an ID route parameter, so we're going to put that up there. Change this to a delete operation, and this should now hit into our delete route. So let's go ahead and try it out. All right, so we got back status true. That's good. Let's go back to the get. Let's actually on the get, though, try to get by ID of the same ID I just deleted. And you'll notice we get back null. We don't get back anything. So it looks like the delete operation did indeed work. So you can see that the code is very, very similar for all of these, whether it's a get, post, put, or delete. Similar concept, but now we have the ability to perform these different CRUD, create, read, update, delete operations. And you can see that also in our controller, if you will, for our RESTful service, everything is staying pretty tight, pretty small. We have thin functions. We don't have a lot of code in there. And we're going to delegate off, as we've been doing the entire course, to our repository layer. So that'll get us started creating the delete action that's going to be performed on the RESTful service side. And we need to add that into the Angular side. So we'll move to that next.
So, okay. What you say is correct only, but without order, how can I go out? I can't cancel the order in Zomato. How can I go out like that? He's not at all considering this. I don't know.
Our Angular service is progressing nicely. We have support for get, put, and post operations, but we don't have support for delete yet, of course. So we're going to add that now. And you're going to see that the same exact methodology we've been following throughout the course is going to be employed. So this is pretty simple, you'll see. So in the data service, we've seen our gets, we've seen our posts, and we've seen our put, but we don't have our delete. So let's go ahead and add that quickly. So we're going to add a delete customer, and we'll of course need to know the ID that we want to delete. We need to pass that up to our RESTful service. That's a MongoDB ID, so it's going to be a string in this case. And then we're just going to return an observable here. And the observable is just going to be a Boolean. We have that status that's going to come back. We'll go ahead and return that. All right, so we have our observable Boolean, and we're kind of ready to go, but we don't have anything returned, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do http.delete this time, and it can really just grab this particular section and tweak it to save a little typing. We're going to pass in the ID, of course. So we'll grab that API/customers, add on the ID that's going to be passed up to us. Then, like usual, we'll go ahead and we'll do our map. So we'll get back our response. And in this case, the response is going to be very, very simple. We're going to just parse that JSON and return the status code back. Then we'll add our catch as well. We'll do our handle error. So very, very simple operation, especially compared to some of the others we did. But we pass in the ID. We pass that ID on the URL. The RESTful service, of course, will then pick that off using the params option on the server side. And we're using the HTTP client's delete operation or delete function here to do it. And then the rest is really the same as what we've been doing before. I'm just going to grab the status this time and return that back to whoever calls. So now we're all set up for a delete operation. You can see that's a pretty simple one to add into our Angular service. So we need to add the code into our components that can call this now.
He doesn't know English also, Hindi also. But customer is purely Hindi. He can understand the English also. And luckily I went on that way.
Supports a delete type of action. Let's go ahead and modify our template-driven form to support a delete. So back in the customer edit component we've worked with several times throughout the course, we already have the gets and we have the ability to do our submit for our update or our insert, but we don't have a delete at this point. We have a little delete option down here you'll see towards the bottom, but we don't have anything in that, so we're going to fix that. So the first thing I'm going to do is when we delete, I'm going to go ahead and say if this is called, we're going to get this event object, and I'm going to take that event object and make sure that we don't bubble it up. So we can do that by saying event.prevent default, and you'll see that actually right above as well. If you haven't encountered that before, it just ensures that no parents also get the event. It kind of cuts it off so it's not going to move on up, and it'll make sure that nothing else fires. Now the next thing I'm going to do is call into the data service. So this will be pretty simple and very similar to what we did for the gets and the insert and updates. We're going to call our delete customer that we just added earlier, and I'm going to pass in the customer's _ID, which is the MongoDB property. And then we're going to go ahead and subscribe to the observable. So very, very similar. We know we get back a Boolean. And we'll make our arrow function here. All right, now before we go too far, I'm going to also add my error. We'll say that's an error of any, or you can leave that off in this case, either way. And we'll just log that. All right, so now what we need to do is really very similar to what we see up here. In fact, I'm going to grab this code, paste it on down, and we don't have a customer, we have a status. We're going to say if the status is good, if it worked, and we were able to successfully delete the customer from the server and the database, let's go ahead and navigate back to the home page. We've seen this a couple times. Else, let's write out unable to delete our customer. And then let me add my missing paren right there to fix that. So now we're good to go. We have a delete operation that can be called, but we're also going to need to add a little bit of code into the template to make sure that we can confirm, do you really want to delete this record? So I'm going to show you what we're going to do there. So we're going to jump to the template for this component in just a moment, but let me show you something up here on the properties first before we move too far. So you'll notice this delete message enabled. And this is going to be something that's going to be set through the UI, through the template. And I just want to call that out right now because you're going to see it here in just a moment. All right, so what I'm going to do now is we have the delete operation in place. Let's go to the template. And there's a little area here for some delete code. Now, I could pop up a modal dialog, and those certainly work fine. And I think that's what most of us are used to. I'm going to show you a little, maybe more simple technique that I actually like better, because with a modal dialog, the user has to move their cursor somewhere else, maybe far, far away. It could be up at the top of the screen, for instance, from where the actual delete button was. I'm going to show you how we can add in not only a delete button, but how we can also confirm, do you really want to delete this without actually using a modal dialog, but it'll still get the job done. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a snippet that I have here rather than typing it all, and we'll talk through this. So I have just a div. You'll notice in this div, I'm only going to show it if we have a customer ID, because if we're doing an insert, it would make no sense to show a delete option. And delete message is enabled. Now I already showed you that. That goes back to this property right here, which is false right now. So when this first loads, if there's a customer ID and delete message is enabled, which is not right now, then this will be hidden, of course. Now all we're going to do here is have some buttons. We're going to have a button here that it's going to have a yes, and if they click that, that's going to call into our delete. We'll then pass the event object in. Otherwise, if they click no, we're going to set the delete message enable back to false, you can see. Now, in order to set delete message enabled to true in the first place, the user needs to click on a delete button. So I'm going to add another little snippet in here, and this will be our delete button. So again, if we have a customer ID, it's not an insert, and it's not enabled. The delete message is not enabled, which would be the case when this first loads. Then when they click and we bind to the click event, we're going to set that to true, the delete message enabled. That, of course, is then going to show this. Now it's going to be up to the user to click yes or no. If they click yes, then we kick off the process we just added earlier, and we call our delete. That'll call into the Node.js RESTful service, and we'll be off and running and can delete and then hopefully go back to our home page of this app. All right, so we have that all ready to go. We have our delete functionality in our template now. We have our delete code. We have our service, and then we have our RESTful service with the route that should handle integrated with MongoDB. Let's go back into our application. Let me refresh now. And let's just click on a customer. We'll go down and see if we have any test ones. You'll see I have a bunch down here. So we'll go down to test. Looks like we have some data, so that's good. And you'll notice delete shows up. Now, just to show you, if we hit cancel and add new customer, notice delete does not show up. That would make sense. And that's all we're doing in the template I showed, is either showing or hiding the delete button based on if there's a customer ID. Now in this case, I do want to delete, so let's go on down and we'll go find the test data. All right, so we can edit it or we can hit delete. Now normally when you hit delete, you'll see a lot of apps pop up a modal, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I kind of like not having to move my cursor very much at all. And so if I hit delete in this case, you'll notice it hides everything else. It's right where my cursor was, and then the user can select yes or no. Now if they hit no, that just resets the delete option back to false, and we're back to where we were. But if they hit yes, then this, of course, should call our delete customer, which calls into our service, which calls into the RESTful service and passes the ID. So let's hit yes, and we got redirected. Now I have a bunch of tests in here, though, so who knows? There was several, but we can actually clean up all of these very quickly now, and you'll see everything's working. Let's delete this last test. All right, and we're good to go. So this is a really nice way, in my opinion, to let the user delete a record and confirm or deny that, but not make them really have to jump around the page much and click on a modal dialog or something that maybe pops up here or over here or wherever it is. But that's all very subjective to how you like to do your UI. I happen to like to keep the user in the general area where they can either hit yes or no, and then it's up to them what they want to do. So there you go. There's an example now of a template-driven form that now we have all the CRUD operations. We can insert a new record. We can obviously edit and update, and then we can also delete that record as well. And so we're getting pretty good here on our template-driven form. Now, of course, we have our other option, which is if you wanted to choose the reactive forms. We need to enhance that as well, because you would choose one of those in your app. So let's go ahead and look at that next. If you wanted to get the delete functionality available in the reactive version of the form, then we can literally take the same exact code that we just did for the template form and just move that over to the reactive form, and it would be ready to go. So let's take a look at that real quick. So back in our template-driven form, we added our delete, and we have this same delete function already in the reactive. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this code, move over to our reactive, and you'll notice the same delete is here, and just paste that in. That's literally all we would have to do. And then, of course, that's going to call the RESTful service. So there's really no other change that we have to do there. Now, if we go into the template of the reactive form, it's also identical to what you saw earlier. We have this delete message enabled. If that's true and there's an ID, then that means they've clicked the delete, and they can then click on yes or no. That then calls our delete. And then we have the same exact delete button that will only show if there's a customer ID and not delete message enabled. And then that will set that particular property to true and start this process of approving or denying the delete request. So on the reactive side, the code itself for both the component code and the template code is really identical to what you saw with the template-driven form. And if you wanted to get this going again, you'd simply have to come into the routing, comment out the template-driven one, start this up, and now we can come on in and refresh. I'll come on down here to one at the bottom, like test 2. There's our delete, and we can hit delete, and there we go. Now the reactive form is also handling our delete operation. Again, another example of reuse of code in our application, and I want to re-emphasize, of course, you wouldn't have both of these forms. I've said this a few times. This is just to show you both types of forms as we're integrating Angular into our RESTful service. So you've now seen the complete CRUD operations integrated into the RESTful service and the Angular application. We've looked at the get, the put, the post, and now we've looked at how we can create a delete action. We've also seen how Angular's HTTP client also supports delete actions. And we've taken a look at a different way of allowing a delete to occur rather than showing a modal, which is completely valid, of course. I showed a different technique where we could just show the yes or the no for the deletion right there inline in the page and minimize the amount of cursor movement that the user has to do. Certainly not the only option, but a different one, and it shows off some of the Angular features with data binding and easily showing and hiding sections of a page. So at this point, we have our CRUD operations wrapped up, but we still have some more to work on. So we're going to talk about some additional bonus features in the next module.